Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to the VBA YLD's Black History Month panel discussion exploring a Black attorney's experiences in the legal profession. I'm Franklin Craigle, president of the VBA YLD, and I have the distinct honor of kicking off today's program. The YLD maintains a strong focus on diversity and inclusion, and as part of that mission, we're happy to host today's discussion. Notably, the response we received to today's discussion has been incredible. In the roughly 10 days the program has been advertised, we sold out, meaning we reached the maximum participation level on our Zoom account. To put that into perspective for you, only a very small number of any VBA event has ever sold out, and my understanding is that no YLD event has ever sold out. That just gives you an idea of both the caliber of today's presentation and the importance of its topic. Because of the importance of today's program and the amount of interest that it's generated, we will be recording this discussion and make it publicly available in very short order. Today's program is going to be a moderated panel discussion, and we've assembled 4 fantastic panelists to weigh in. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we're not going to open this panel discussion up to Q&A, but if you do have any questions for any of the panelists, please email it to thevba@vba.org, and we will forward it to the appropriate panelist. If you need that again, I'm going to try to put it in the chat feature, and also it can be found on the registration page for today's event. While today is the start of the conversation, it's certainly not going to be the end, and my hope is that we will continue this discussion through future programming. And now I want to introduce the moderator for today's discussion. When asked to find a bright young lawyer to lead our Black History Month discussion, I didn't have to look far and just walk down the hall. I want to introduce for you all Jillian Bates, my friend and colleague. By way of background, Jillian obtained her undergraduate degree from William & Mary, and then for law attended the HBCU NC Central University School of Law, where she served as editor-in-chief of the Law Review. Since law school, Jillian has joined Hirschler as a commercial real estate associate and has been a rock star in the Central Virginia real estate community. I'm sure that Jillian's experience and perspective will similarly add meaning to today's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, Jillian Bates.
Thank you so much, Frank. And thank you to our audience members who have joined us for this very important conversation. It's an honor to have been asked to lead today's discussion. It's something that's very close to my heart for obvious reasons. The purpose of our conversation today is to learn more about our panelists, their experience as attorneys, and their perspective on the state of diversity and inclusion in the legal profession today. At the end of this conversation, it's my hope that all of us are able to walk away from this with our own practical checklists of action items, things that we can do personally, professionally to help advance diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. So we as Frank has said, we organized and collected all of these really awesome panelists here for you today. We made a really great effort to make sure that it was diverse in age, stage and career, practice area, public sector, private sector, so that you all could get a good feel for as many perspectives as possible. So that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce Victor Cardwell, partner and chairman of the board of directors at Woods Rogers PLC, as well as president-elect for the VBA. Rita Davis, chief counsel to the Honorable Ralph S. Northam, governor of Virginia. DeVon Simmons, staff attorney at the Virginia State Crime Commission, and Etahjayne Harris, litigation associate at McGuireWoods, LLP. Thank you all for joining us. And I encourage all of our attendees to read more about all of our panelists using the bio that we shared with you yesterday in yesterday's email. So I would like to begin this discussion talking about a little bit of background. So Etahjayne, could you tell us a little bit about why you decided to become an attorney? What inspired you?
Sure. So my path to the law and the legal field was not linear. I guess when I was younger, I thought about being an attorney based on the TV shows I watched, like The Practice. If you guys remember that show. And then when I got to high school, I thought about being a doctor. I thought about being an opera singer, all these different career paths. And then I finally settled on law when I got my first office job after undergrad. I was a legal assistant at an immigration law firm, and I worked with attorneys, one in particular, a Black attorney, and she was doing so well. And she took me under her wing and, told me a little bit about her background and how she got into the law and things like that. And I said, okay, I can do this too. This seems like something that'd be a great fit for me. And here I am now.
Thank you. Victor, can you tell us a little bit of what inspired you to become an attorney?
Oh yeah, I'd like to say it was a TV show, but it would be Matlock or Perry Mason. So we won't, unless of course you saw Perry Mason on HBO, which if you haven't watched it. But I was just fortunate. I had 4 driven siblings and parented by 2 people. I'll help with that later. My older sister Renee was the first college graduate of my family. She went to Georgetown Law. And so it introduced the law to me in a way in which, became real. Somebody in my house was a lawyer. I'm like, holy crap. And that's a legal word too, crap. And so from there, I went to UVA, played, and ironically, one of my coaches at UVA, he called me Silver Tongue. And he said, you maybe can turn this into something. And it's not as glamorous or as thoughtful as having an introduction to the law like Etahjayne did, but it was effective enough to get me looking into it seriously. And the next thing you know, 30 years later, I'm still doing it. And knock on wood, it's been fun.
Rita, could you tell us about one of your most influential mentors early in your career that made a big impact on you and your career?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate not to have just one, so it's kind of hard to narrow that down. I will say that probably the first really influential mentor I had in my early career was someone who didn't necessarily look like me, but who sort of epitomized what I wanted to be as I matured as a lawyer. And she was the sort of person who was very hard driven and very candid, and an excellent lawyer. And so I would be shocked to think that she knew that she was my mentor at the time, to be honest. I considered her my mentor. But I just sort of watched her, and I sort of tried to emulate what she did, and tried to understand why she did things the way she did them and learn from them. And she was a great mentor to me.
Thank you for sharing. DeVon, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Who was a early mentor for you, and what impact did they have on your career?
Yeah, so for me, my path was not as traditional. Didn't have a lot of experience or association with anybody else who was currently in the field. So when I first got into the field, I was blessed to come across a lot of different people who took me under their wing some way or another, and would show me different aspects of either how to behave or how to litigate or something along those lines. So really what I've tried to do from the beginning of my career, and what I still try to do now, is just accumulate quality relationships. And from those quality relationships, I think I get the same impact of having that, like, maybe traditional mentor kind of relationship, but it comes from a variety of places. So,
Etahjayne, can you tell us what inclusion looks like to you in the profession?
To me, inclusion not only looks like diversity, because that's one part of inclusion. It looks like having people of color, Black people, at the various levels of the profession. For example, I can speak about being in the private sector in a firm setting, where the people at the top don't necessarily look like the people, the associate levels. So to me, inclusion looks like having a seat at the table, and that table is where the important decisions are made. So not only having Black associates and Black summer associates, but having Black partners, Black women partners, Black equity partners, people of color at the various levels of the decision making. I think that's really important. And I think that's the next step from translating diversity to also inclusion.
Rita, can you add to that? What do you think inclusion looks like in the profession?
Well, I totally agree with everything Etahjayne just said. I think that's very important. I think it also means there is an implicit obligation for those who are sitting at the table, not only to make sure that other people get to sit in the seat when they get up, who look like them, who think, like them, but there is also a very intentional way of canvassing the people at the table to make sure that people are being heard and that opinions are being considered, not necessarily that they're all agreed with, but there's no need of sitting at the table if the expectation is that you're going to be silent there.
That's a good point. And a little bit more about perspective. So Victor,
Yes.
could you tell me what are some common misconceptions that you think people have about diversity and inclusion? And kind of a second part to that would be, how can we combat those misconceptions to communicate more effectively?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's a lot of detail or nuances associated with it. I think one of the most common misconceptions about people is that diversity and inclusion demand that I get there today, right now, immediately. That's going to be off-putting to the people in the majority. I mean, one of the realities of issues of diversity and inclusion that I train on and deal with is the recognition that, by definition, if you share some of your power with me at the table, to quote Rita and Etahjayne, then by definition, you're losing some. And so I think we have to, for those of us who are pushing the issues of diversity and inclusion forward, we have to recognize that. That's a hard thing to do. I'd reference an interview to Dr. Roosevelt Thomas, a person who was sort of the father of diversity thought in Virginia out of Morehouse University. And he talked about how difficult it was to actually manage these issues of diversity. So I think those misconceptions are that we demanded immediately. But let's be clear, this is not a situation where we're going to wait until the next time, wait until the next event. We have to keep pushing forward every day, having that conversation. And I think the more we have that conversation, that helps battle the misconception that, to Etahjayne's point, it's a great firm she's at, but we understand that you can't jump me from a second-year associate to the partnership table, but you should show me a path. Now, they probably should, Etahjayne, frankly, and I know some of those people, so I'll talk to them about that. But show me the path and make sure the path is lit enough that I don't have to go in the dark of night stumbling for it. I think DeVon, when he said earlier, he amasses a lot of different connections. I think those connections can help light the path. And as long as they're there doing that, then we can battle the fear that diversity and inclusion will engender the majority of people. And we can also make sure they understand that we know that we have to work to get it done. But don't let me work and then be frustrated. Show me some path to success. Those are at least the general thoughts.
Okay. DeVon, do you have any opinions on the same? So any misconceptions that people have?
Yeah, I guess my first thought is that no matter your background, where you're coming from, people generally want like three things, right? They want their version of success, happiness, and security. I mean, that's what most people come to work looking for. And I think that common ground bonds people. And the idea that you have to have like some type of process outside of how you normally bond with people, I think is a bit overrated. I think honest conversations hide behind the veil of professionalism. And if people sit down and have honest conversations about where they're coming from, like Victor mentioned, maybe their fears and associations with intermingling, and have that honest talk, we become better for it as a unit, as a whole.
That's a good point.
And Jillian,
Go
if
ahead.
I may, I just have one comment. I would like for people to understand that because you are someone of a diverse ethnicity or gender, that you do not have to carry the banner of DE&I, right? And you shouldn't feel guilty if you don't want to carry the banner of DE&I. It is fine. One of the sort of benefits of the progress that we've made is for someone to have the ability to be in a position of success, to be at the table and say, listen, I don't want to be here just because you want to ask me about DE&I. I don't want to be a part of that conversation. I don't want to be a part of your efforts to recruit. I don't want to be, the poster child for diversity and equity inclusion. And hopefully you are in an organization that is understanding of that. So I want us to understand there is space for people who are diverse not to have to be a part of this movement and feel comfortable in that. And we should all respect that decision.
If I can, and I think Rita hit on a very important point, but one of the realities is that person probably will be challenged by people of color at some point in time, and they need to be comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm doing this my own way. If it's a person who doesn't care about it and it's not even in that wheelhouse, that's probably not a person who's going to be on this call or having a conversation with us anyway. But I think Rita's exactly right that those of us who care about this issue, and it's hard sometimes, have to give space to a person who may not want to, push this forward at the same manner in which I do. And I'm sure I don't push it forward the same manner other people would want. So I think I just kudos to this panel for recognizing there's a spectrum of people and we have to be willing to let them work. But those of us who are willing to push, we got to push that much harder.
Okay. Etahjayne, based on your experiences, what do you think are the most critical changes that we need to make in order to make the profession more diverse and inclusive for Black attorneys?
I think focusing on the pipeline to the legal field, from young people to being a lawyer. For example, when I got to law school, I realized that I apologize for this background noise. My dog is going crazy. But anyways, I realized when I got to law school that a lot of my classmates had a lot of lawyers in their life, whether it be their parents or their parents' friends, or just people that they grew up with. They had lawyers that they could look to and that they could maybe get a summer job from. And I didn't have that. I didn't know that many lawyers. I don't know that I knew any lawyers before I got to law school. And so I think that focusing on outreach programs where we as attorneys can be in front of young people and say, hey, I'm doing that. I look like you, you look like me. This is a potential career path for you. I think it's important for children to see people that look like them in all different types of fields. And so I think starting at a younger age, not necessarily networking events geared towards law students who are already on that path, I think starting before then would be really helpful.
DeVon, what are your thoughts on critical changes that we need to make?
Yeah, I love everything that was just said. Excellent point. My thought on it was I have, in my experience, places where it felt very inclusive. It was made clear at the very beginning of my onboarding or whatever it is that was part of their mission, right? Part of getting to know what my role would be or my coworkers was also the idea that, hey, we're going to open up the conversation of how we either handle things, our processes, and maybe where we're going as an office to what your thoughts may be on the matter. And having that clarity in the beginning gives you a certain amount of freedom to have those conversations and not feel like if I prod or push a bit, there might be some pushback on me personally or professionally. So making sure that the environment is welcoming and making sure that's communicated clearly, I think goes a long way.
Now I want to talk about opportunity for Black attorneys kind of in the past and currently and today. And I particularly want to pose this question to Rita and Victor. So Victor, based on your experience and everything you've seen, how have you seen job opportunities change over the course of your career? And what are some factors that you think may have contributed to that change?
Thank you, Jillian. Now, obviously, I would have said ladies first every time, but that's all right. Rita, forgive me. Listen, the change from when I went to law school to today is dramatic and impressive. Much more work needs to be done. You know, I went to UVA undergrad and then went to WNL after a little fantasy, and I went to Lexington, right? So I was in Lexington, Virginia. That's the first thing, and that was a hard road to hoe. It was a very good school, but a school, if you talk about lack of diversity, it lacked it at every level. And I went there, frankly, because, well, I'd actually started Georgetown. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I think that's important to have that background. You know, it's interesting, when I came out of WNL, I had a professor, and he was one of my mentors. He was a person whom I did bond with and related to. And he told me after the fact, I left to go to DC to work at DOL, and I mentioned that for a reason. Majority white firms were not as readily available for minority attorneys when I came into law school. There were plenty of Black attorneys working in some of those firms, but not a lot. I mean, we should be very clear. In point of fact, he recounted a situation to me where a very large firm, one of the multinational firms now based out of Virginia, without naming one of the two, had inquired about me. And he made a unilateral decision. And at the time I was like, how dare you? And he made a unilateral decision to say to them, no, he's not the right, you're not the right firm for him. And he did it out of the goodness of his heart. I like Victor. Victor will not thrive in your environment. It's an interesting thing that he made that decision, right? And he did. And the good news is I am where I am, and so I feel good about that. The bad news is the opportunities were not great, but I think they have changed dramatically, and every day they've changed. Every day that people like Rita are sitting to her positions, every day that firms, like Woods Rogers, based in Roanoke, recognizes the importance of having a lawyer like me and giving me the space to be me and not turn me into whatever a typical lawyer is, but becoming what is a typical lawyer. And, and we can't ignore the social movements that have happened around us even right now. There are reasons why we're having this conversation. There are reasons why Coca-Cola and other companies are asking about the diversity and inclusion of law firms when putting out business. And so I think the opportunities are there for us, and I think the changes are occurring. It does not mean they're happening fast enough, because we get in the door doesn't mean we are holding the door open for other people yet. But I think there are a lot of different ways, but it's changed a lot. From when I went to law school to where I am today, and I hope it continues to go forward in this path. Rita, did you see something similar?
I did. As a WNL grad, undergrad, I absolutely concur in everything you said with respect to Washington and Lee University. I too went there because the financial aid package was just incredible. But I got a great education, as I'm sure you did, Victor. And so what I would add to what Victor said is that, when Victor and I kind of came along, at least for me, I didn't, as many of the panelists have said, I didn't have a lot of contacts in the legal industry. So I didn't have someone to go to and say, I'm going to need a job, and can you give me a reference, or where should I go? Victor apparently had someone who could help him with that. I did not. And so a lot of it was my own steam and doing interviews. I think that has changed so much in the last 20 years because you have so many Fortune 100s, Fortune 200 companies that saying we demand to see some diversity, and they in turn reflect diversity, on their, their trustee boards or their board of executives. And so, there are lots of opportunities to see people who are more diverse in power and in sort of positions of leadership. And so, as I said before, hopefully the result of that is that, you are going to help someone else along. And so the benefit here is that, and we all know this, right? The legal profession is about relationships. That's all it really is. And so you now have, I think, more opportunities to have relationships with people who are diverse, who look like you, who may think like you, and to be able to leverage those relationships into legal positions that, before you may not have had a contact in. That means also the dreaded networking word, right? Which unfortunately in our virtual environment makes it much more difficult to sort of cultivate those relationships, but it is imperative that we continue to do so because that's how you get opportunities.
That's a great point. All of those points were, in my opinion, on point. So now I want to turn to Etahjayne and DeVon. So what inclusion strategies have you both observed in the legal profession and in the workplace during your time in the profession, and which have been the most effective and which have not? I'll let Etahjayne go first.
Okay. So I've only been in practice for a few years now, but thus far I've had a great experience at my firm. For example, starting out my first day, I was paired with a mentor who ended up being one of my supervising partners, who is a Black woman, a Black partner, and she took me under her wing. And not only is she a phenomenal attorney, but she also, as a person, on a personal level, we have that great relationship where I can talk to her about anything. And I think that's been really like a safe space for me. And then also the firm has recently started, within the last year and a half or so, a racial injustice task force. And it's a group of attorneys who there's Black associates, Black partners, white partners, all different types of people. We get together maybe once a month and just have open conversation about what can we do, what's going on in this country, how can we give back, what can we do as lawyers that can make some meaningful change. And that's been really cool to see that my firm cares about that kind of thing and is making this space available for us as lawyers to have open conversation. It's not always polite conversation, but it's like honest conversation, which I think is really important. And so, yeah, those are the two things that have been effective and that I've really benefited from, and I appreciate. Yeah.
Well, to piggyback, I have a different experience, right? My career has been in public interest. I haven't walked into a position where there were people who didn't have a certain mission in mind, and usually that mission includes helping different populations with various things, right? So that comes with a certain mindset. So the offices felt inclusive many places I've been. What I will say is that a practice that I experienced that was very impactful was around May, right? So when everything was going on in the world, George Floyd was murdered, we have our meetings, and I would come to work and sometimes not carry my full self with me, right? Things I was having conversations with my wife or friends, I might not have the conversation at work. That changed. The meeting started with having a conversation about what was going on in the world, and I didn't start the conversation. And I thought that was amazingly impactful. Just that small offer of let's talk about this, let's address this. And it's continued, to have conversations about what's actually happening in the world. And then we talk about the work and how the work relates to those things. So that's extremely helpful. One thing I have seen that was not so impactful are the meetings where we're having conversations about diversity and inclusion, and then you realize there's a meeting after that meeting where the decisions actually occur, right? And it might not be in the office. It might be, we went to go have a drink after work, and then we decided this is how we're moving forward, right? And then that separation breeds contempt in the entire process. So I think the takeaway, at least for me, is obviously having those honest conversations, but also if you are going to have a diverse mission, you have to be very mindful of where those conversations happen and who's there when they do happen.
Next
Jillian,
question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if I could add to what DeVon said, and I apologize, we didn't practice that part of it. But what I would say to everybody, I mean, any strategy that people have in place that's trying to promote diversity and inclusion is going to be well accepted by most of us. Ones that are not heartfelt, though, one that seem to be trying to check a box, we're not dumb. We see it, and there are people who sometimes are sitting in the room and I see them, nodding or there, but they're on their phones, they're doing something else. That's completely ineffective. And that's going to be completely off-putting. So if I can say anything to my friends who are in majority firms in those places, just be careful. If you ask for it or if you want to do it, step forward and do it. But do not, under any circumstances, disrespect the effort, the people you are dealing with, and by thinking you can check a box and we're going to be okay with that, because it's not going to be okay. I apologize for jumping in, but I think that's ineffective.
I just want to piggyback on something and say that being in public kind of interest in governmental lawyer, I will be honest with you. I mean, I'm not probably a shrinking ballad, as you can see. So, I come in every day, I'm rocking the natural hair, I might wear leather, who knows what I will come in with. And I will tell you that very often I am the most conservative person in the governor's office when it comes to DE&I, which is really refreshing, right? And pretty unique in and of itself. And I know that there are not many of us who have that experience, but I just want you to be aware that, it exists, and it exists right now in this moment, and it's being promoted by people who don't look like us, who don't have our experiences, and they are pushing hard. And I think that is wonderful. Absolutely. And I hope it continues.
Keeping in mind this effort for people people in the profession pushing for diversity and inclusion, I want to also consider just the time we're in and what's been going on in the world and the social movements. So, and I kind of want to pose this to all of you, because I think that all of you have something to contribute to this. What do you think that the social movements of today, particularly Black Lives Matter, has impacted diversity and inclusion in the legal profession? And anyone can jump in, but
I think ladies first, because I have plenty to add, but I think I'd be curious about Rita. And yeah, well, fine. I will go ahead and start it. And I'll say this first and foremost. I rocked a bracelet, and it matters to me. I think the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole has introduced, in an unflinching way, what society needs to see about Black people, and that is something has to change. And that takes a murder for it to occur. But as we take that and bring it back into our professional lives, we still are in a position where something has to change. I think we should be careful and clear, though. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement can also be used against us when people think those are the rioters, those are, this and that. And so we have to be very careful in our own spaces to say, no, that's not what the movement is about. That's not what the concept is about. The concept is, you don't have to give me anything. I go back to a long time ago, the NAACP, the advancement of education. You don't have to give me anything, but give me an opportunity. That's all I'm asking for. And I think the social consciousness has made, as we've all pointed out now, people who don't look like us aware of this issue and concern. And I think we should all be very careful too, that we don't block those people out because they don't look like us. I think that's an important thing as well. There are people who are as white as they can be, who've grown up in metropolitan areas or suburbs, who care. And if and they may even be misguided, but heck, some of us are misguided too. So I think it has had a significant impact on the legal profession and on the ability for us to say, yes, we want more and we demand more. And I think it's incumbent upon us to use that power, aggressively and advisedly. Don't be so quick to tell them, no, you don't know my story. Listen to me and let me hear yours too. I can ramble about this forever. I think it's very important though. And I like the question. Thank you for asking it.
Rita, do you have anything to add to that, or does anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I echo everything Victor says. I think what the Black Lives Matter movement has done is sharpened the issue of equity and inclusion. We've been talking about it for years. We've been sort of sauntering around the edges of how we're going to do it, and this has just brought it to a boiling point, and it has exacerbated whether you're pro BLM or you're anti. And as we've seen in January, there are a lot of people who were upset over this sort of shifting of power, or at least perceived power in our country. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon. And so what it has done is it has challenged those of us who feel there is past time for change to be able to also have conversations with people who don't want that change. And, you know, one of the things I consistently worry about is that people who are forced to change at the, you know, at the butt of a gun or at the end of a gun are going to change, but they're only going to do it till the gun's not, you know, pointed at them anymore. That's not the kind of change we want, right? So we have to be, I think, a little mindful of how hard we push, because we want to change minds and change hearts, which I think we've done to a large measure. But when people feel coerced into that change, it doesn't last. And they just wait till the pendulum swings back and they get the power and they change it all. And I don't want to see that happen.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just add,
Yes,
definitely echo those sentiments, but I think the one thing the movement has shown me that we're going from, and I think awareness is amazing. We're still building awareness. It's definitely an issue that still needs attention, but the conversations are starting to shift in terms of processes, and we're moving into the how. And that is huge, right? Like that conversation has real meaningful impact on actually changing people's outcomes, lives, and thought processes. And I love that we're actually starting there instead of asking people to see us. Now that we have that spotlight, we can actually start to move forward a bit. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything everyone has said. I think that this summer in particular, Black Lives Matter has been a great catalyst for not only starting conversation, but moving us forward. And it's kind of like it's moving from thoughts and prayers to action. And I think, so yeah, I think it's great. I think we're moving hopefully in the right direction. And I'm excited about the future.
kind of going off of what the sentiment that DeVon just made about the how. So Victor, do you think enough is kind of being done in to advance diversity and inclusion in the profession? And if not, what needs to be done, or how do we do it?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. You know, and as we're all lawyers, I look at words and I analyze words, and enough is a big word. It's enough being done, right? I can say we're just light years ahead of where we were even 20 years ago, I'm sure, and I know 30 years ago. But is that enough? No, because we've been held down for a very long time. So, you know, enough is all relative. I think we have to be careful, and I got to go back to it. And it's not, you know, you need to know, I'm not that person who shrinks from anything. If Rita walks into a room with her natural hair and her leather and she's rocking it, I walk in with my bald head and I'm right beside her. I ain't behind her, I'm right beside her going, you go, girl. You know, so, but enough is a big word. And you know, I'll say this. I mean, you know, I'm very involved in the VBA. I'm president-elect. I'm thrilled with that. I'm looking forward to being in that seat, and I'm looking forward to working with Richard Ollinger, who's president right now. And that organization represents lawyers who want to be involved and who want to be together. And I think, you know, enough is the wrong word. The better word is, you know, not just trying, but doing. I go back to DeVon's point earlier. You know, are we doing things that advance the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are we, and I go to Etahjayne, you know, are we reaching down to undergraduate schools and telling people lawyers exist? You know, I mean, we started recruiting now just recently, you know, at some HBCUs, and I'm thrilled that we are for lawyers, but we have to also go to some HBCU campuses, undergrad campuses, just like we go, you know, to UVA or anywhere else that we may have gone to school, and let them know, hey, this is actually a viable option for you. You know, you don't have to come out of school and go into X, whatever X might be. You know, lawyers exist. And so that enough is a moving target. What I'm gonna say to you is, we're doing so much more than we've ever done. And I'm talking about Black lawyers like us having this conversation, and majority firms like those that are represented here, or the governor's office, or, you know, DeVon, and working with frankly, if I can keep my young brothers and sisters out of the system, then I got more lawyers coming. I got more people who are going to be doing positive things. I got an 18-year-old son. So these are important topics to me at every level. You know, a 17-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, and the son always seems to be a little bit dumber. I love him. Don't, you know, but I can say that boys are dumber. You know, Rita, that's what we do.
No comment, no comment.
You don't have to. DeVon and I both know that I'm speaking gospel here, so we'll let it go. But the fact is, enough being done. No, not enough is being done, but so much more is being done than ever done before, that we're at a great place in history, and our job is to keep pushing it forward. In the profession, we have to make sure people understand how noble this profession is at every level, be it in private practice or public sector, that we really aren't the joke, you know, the used car salesman lawyer. No, we're people who matter, and we make differences at every table we sit in, be it real estate, you know, or criminal, or labor and employment, or government. It doesn't matter. We still make a difference because our presence alone makes a difference. I could go on about this, but enough, not enough, but we're on the right side of the tracks right now. And we got to be ready for the pendulum to swing back and still keep pushing. I think Rita hit on a great point. And my last comment, Barack Obama came and he was there in the office and we saw it for 8 years. And then we saw Donald Trump come right back. And so we know the pendulum swings, and our job is to be sure that when it swings, it doesn't swing back quite so far, and we start pushing it forward. I think we've seen as far back as it can go, and our job is to make sure we start stopping it every time there's a change, and we start keeping advancing this ball. I apologize for speaking too much, but it's such an important topic.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I would add that I have a personal experience I'd like to share with respect to how it really sort of hit me that times have changed. So, you know, I grew up some years ago, you know, and I was in high school in the 80s. And for any of us who were in high school in the 80s, right, it was a time of a lot of fashion no-nos, but sort of the concept of beauty in the 80s was, you know, the blonde woman, the blue eyes, you know, the svelte figure, and all of this. And so I will admit that, you know, growing up, I sort of envied that look. That was not me, right? I didn't see myself on magazines. I didn't see myself on TV. And so this westernized sort of epitome of what is beautiful, you know, grew up with me for a while. On my journey, I shed that. But I was visiting a neighbor, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, and she was white. She has 5 children, and her youngest is a 5-year-old little girl, beautiful little girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, great spirit, wonderful little girl. And I brought my daughter, who at the time was 9, over to play. And I had spent an inordinate amount of time cornrolling my daughter's hair. And you know, you feel me on this. And I was rather proud of my attempt. But so we're sitting there and we're playing, and the little blonde girl looks over at my daughter and she looks at her mother and she said, "Mom, can you please do my hair like that?" And I thought, this is some Twilight Zone stuff, right? I mean, like, this is a change. Never have I ever heard a white woman say, please do my hair in this very ethnic style. I mean, this is not a Bo Derek situation, right? For those of us who can remember. This is a young person who genuinely saw the beauty in something that was completely opposite of her and appreciated it, right? And had no problem telling her mother she appreciated it, which made me feel really warm inside and hopeful, right? That this is real change. I mean, not the stuff that you can measure, but it's out there and it's happening.
Rita, I hate to ask, how did mother respond? Did she say, please help me out?
She said, "Oh, I'm not sure we could get your hair like that, honey. We'll have to try."
Yeah.
That was fair.
Listen, it was fair. And DeVon and Etahjayne, I got to say this very quickly. I have a good friend who is white, and she had braided her hair to match some of her teammates. And it was an amazing thing how she, and this was later, right? So early 2000s, late 90s, how she was sort of outcast. You know, you're trying to look like us, you're trying to appropriate our culture, you know, without using those words, that concept is there. Right. And that's the kind of thing we got to like it when people appreciate our beauty for what it really is. right? Not in some derogatory way. We got to say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This does look good. I'm glad you like it too. and you know, there's so many things we could talk about. But sorry, DeVon, you were about to say something.
No, I love it. I love it. Tell the stories. My only point was, when I think about enough, is that I don't think about diversity and inclusion in terms of a destination. I don't think there's a finish line for it. I think this is a process. And I think that right now is an amazing time. Love the stories, right? Like that reflection, like that, look at where we've come from.
Yes.
We kind of have to revel in that in order to catch the inspiration and keep going. Right? Like this is going to be a journey for all of us, and it's not going to stop. There will not be an end to it if we do this correctly. And I think that's the beauty in it. And we should really try to revel these moments, like right now. It's a beautiful moment. That's what the process is about.
Totally agree. And hopefully, let's say 20 years from now, we'll have fun stories like the one Rita just shared, and we'll be warm and fuzzy too.
No question.
So I want to kind of open this up to taking the discussion to a direction about some action items for even people watching, and not just in regards to like large firms, but also like small or mid-sized firms, or local government, or any office that has attorneys where they want to diversify, they want to be more inclusive and equitable, and they want to see and hear people of color in their spaces. What are some things that you think that they should all keep in mind? I mean, we've addressed so many of them already, but kind of putting it out clear for them. What would you guys say to them? I'm going to open it up to everyone to be able to say what you think.
Listen, I'm sorry for jumping in, but I'm in what is a mid-sized firm. You know, with Rogers, I'm in a firm that I am the first Black partner in the firm's history. The firm's 130 plus years old, and I don't take that as necessarily some all compliment to me or derogatory comment about my firm. I think it's a good firm who has struggled to bring people of color who are qualified, who live in Roanoke as opposed to Richmond, Charlotte, New York, DC, all places I go all the time anyway. And so for a small or mid-sized firm, the fact that they're asking the question is progress, right? And I think DeVon hit on it and the entire panel. You know, this progress and these processes are not going to happen overnight. But I think if you have an interest, I mean, and I will tell you what I did. Something I did very recently is I called Howard University's law school, and I got opportunity to speak to the dean of admissions, and then I had opportunity to speak to a dean who's in charge of recruiting. And I said, we have an interest. We have a strong interest, but frankly, I've failed in the past. And I think for small and mid-sized firms, those efforts can pay dividends, because what they haven't done, my firm's history is based on W&L, UVA, and then later University of Richmond Law School. And then, you know, and that was its history. And I'm not going to walk away from that. I'm going to say that's what it was. And when you got the top 5 or 10% of those schools, you know, they were white. That's who they were. As we go forward today, though, I would say small and mid-sized firms have to be aware that they can recruit and retain people in different markets if you show them, and I go back to my concept earlier, a path to success. You may have a hard time getting a kid out of Brooklyn to come live in Roanoke, but you may not have a hard time with a kid who lived in Brooklyn who then had opportunity to go and spend time in Lynchburg and say, you know what, this can work for you, you know, and make the recruitment effort bigger. If they have siblings or parents that they respect and care about, talk to them and say, let me tell you what we see for your son or your brother. You know, it might take more than a simple phone call that you would do in a regular sense, but ain't nothing regular about recognizing and accepting diversity, equity, and inclusion. It requires us to think differently than we thought before. And for people who are willing to do that, they can make progress. And again, panelists, I apologize for jumping in, but I'm in that firm and I see it, and I think it's a firm that's got great opportunity, but we compete with Richmond, Charlotte, New York, DC, and that's real.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Okay, I'll just jump in. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Rita.
I agree with everything you said. I also think we also have to remember that While there are firms out there who are making these sincere efforts, we have to put ourselves as attorneys of color in places to be seen, in places to be recognized. So here's my pitch for your local bar associations. Get involved in the local bar associations that cater to a specific practice area, or if there is Hill Tucker Bar or the old DBA bar, get involved in those as a young associate or a young attorney, because you are going to gain so much from being involved in those. And if you are a small law firm or a mid-sized law firm, look for opportunities to support those local bars. You know, agree to host a meeting or, you know, sponsor an event or whatever, because associating with organizations that are geared to the success of African Americans or other diverse attorneys is automatically going to put you at least in the conversation of people who are diverse, who are looking for places to join, right? You seem to see me, so I may check you out. And so, you know, don't forget about that aspect of it. But it's also incumbent on us as people of color to make sure that when the question is asked, who can I get? Who is qualified? That you can raise your hand and say, I'm here, I'm qualified. So you got to be seen, you got to make it known, you got to network. And I'm sorry to keep using that word, but it's really important.
Gospel.
Is there anything that anyone feels compelled to add as last point? Because we're almost out of time, and I want to allow you guys to say something that I may have missed an opportunity to bring up.
I'll jump in. My last thought is that make sure you show up authentically yourself. Don't reserve a part of who you are, thinking that you need to fit into a certain aesthetic or behavior pattern that you're currently seeing. What makes you different is what people are going to be attracted to. And the way we generally qualify who's able to do the job might not take into account your experiences that can add to whatever they're trying to accomplish. So make sure you're authentically yourself, not only for your sanity, but it will push the mission further along. That's where the success comes from. The idea of diversity and inclusion isn't just to make people feel better. It's that with diverse thoughts, we are better. The work is better. What we're trying to accomplish is better. So you shrinking yourself doesn't help us get there. So make sure you're authentically yourself.
That's a great point. Anyone else?
Okay, fine. You can't give me listen, you got a panel with four lawyers on here and expect it to be time? No, come on, we're gonna take this. No, I would DeVon and Rita hit on something that Etahjayne in her nascent career and other young lawyers should all hear, and that is make yourself available, be it the VBA, Hill Tucker Bar. And one of my most proud things about the VBA is this association with the ODBA. And you've got to do that and recognize these long-standing historical organizations that do support us. And again, it goes back. If you're involved in those, and I think Rita hit it, I mean, just spot on. If you're involved in those and are supporting those in any way whatsoever, you're going to find people who are, to DeVon's point, being authentic and who they are. And, you know, and organizations where people see you and promote you and push you up. That's what's going to make you that person who can easily raise their hand, or put another way, other people can raise your hand for you. They're going to say, no, you need to hear about DeVon Simmons. I've seen him, forgive me, I've seen that brother there on video. You need to meet him. I'm telling you right now. You know, those kind of things are going to happen, and those kind of things are what we as lawyers should always be promoting. And I do not want to walk away without thinking that those of us who have been here, who are at the back end of our careers, just have to, you know, and I don't need to quote our new vice president or anybody else, but we have to make sure that door is held open. We have to make sure that we are taking the steps necessary so people, you know that, look, even if Victor screwed up, there are other good minority lawyers right behind him waiting to take his spot, or other spots, or your spot. Don't be afraid of it. Let it happen. This is a fun topic, and I'm as I wrote to my panelists, I'm proud to be part of this with you guys. I really am.
Jillian, could I just add one more thing, and I promise I'll be quick. I promise.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not saying to this, I'm not going to say this because we're, talking to diverse attorneys. I say this to all young attorneys. This profession is demanding. If you don't love it with your heart and soul, don't do it. It's okay to fail. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to move out and, to a different area. It's fine, right? But the problem is that this is such an incredible profession to be in, and we're so blessed to do it, but it takes a lot out of you. And no job, no matter how much money they're paying you, is worth your happiness. So at the end of the day, if you don't go home and say, I really enjoyed my job. Now, granted, you're not going to say that every day, as Victor and I could probably attest. It's not going to happen every day. But on balance, if you can't say, I love what I do, then you should think very hard about whether or not you continue to do it. And there is no shame about, changing a horse, as my father would say, midstream, if you need to do that, because your happiness and wellness at the end of the day is what really matters. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for that. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I wish we could have more time to continue this conversation, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity in the future too. But for now, again, thank you for joining us and having this awesome conversation for just amongst us and the attendees. And I also want to give a big thank you to the VBA staff for helping us make this happen. A big thank you to Nate Shepard, Associate at Hunt Andrews and Kurth, who co-chaired this event with me and went through all of the things to organize this and make this happen as well. And of course, our audience for being here, being present, listening, and hearing us and seeing us. So with that said, take good care, and hopefully I'll see you again and we'll be able to continue this conversation.
We must.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.